Smart Hagman is still going to be in Israel.
Yeah, so Marv said he has this Shabbos and then the next Shabbos, and then he's coming back. We covered that topic before you arrived. Okay. Joby wanted to know how much longer you have there.
Yeah, we'll have to compare notes, Joby, about Tanya.
I'm just missing you.
Same.
Okay, so why don't we get started? We are discussing the thing that we started on Wednesday, is that there's a water leak, right? And the tenant feels that he didn't benefit from the water, but so therefore he shouldn't have to pay. So Rav Sharaga had said that on the one hand, if the tenant's name is on the utility bill for the water, so then it's clear that it's the tenant's responsibility. The landlord has no involvement at all between the supply of water that's provided by the municipality and the consumer of water. It's got nothing to do with the landlord. Let's see. He says, let's see. He says, well, we had I think we had started this Sif Bays, and the argument was that there are two arguments to make the tenant liable. Kevin Shuhuzesh, he's the user of the water, and number two, the bill is in his name, so there's really no reason to make the landlord liable. And then and therefore, even if there's a leak and the tenant got no benefit from the water, he still has to pay for the water that was supplied. And therefore, the advice that we can give to the landlord is he should immediately put all of the utilities in the name of the tenant. And therefore, there won't be any involvement between the landlord and the suppliers of the utilities. And that's where we left it off yesterday or Wednesday. I think what we were discussing is that when it comes to the electric supply and gas, that you can easily do, and phone and things like that, right? But when it comes to water, Marv was saying that if you're a homeowner, you can't transfer the water bill over to the tenant. That has to be it always remains in the name of the owner of the home. I guess, but in Israel, it's probably, well, I would think that in any apartment where there are multiple meters, there probably still will be the opportunity to transfer it over to the tenant, but it's not clear that you can always do that. So we were just going to do the Makor Baruch in this paragraph over here. He says, "Bozeh yesh ladun kevin demitzad echad hasocher hu says shemishtamesh befoal b'mayim." He says, so there's a deliberation to be made here, because on the one hand, the tenant is the one who's using the water, and therefore, that's the argument to say that he's liable for all payments. But on the other hand, if the bill and the water user, from the standpoint of the utility company, has the name of the homeowner or the landlord on it, then we could argue that the responsibility of payment is upon the landlord. And the tenant should only have to pay what he used. Rav Nisim Karelitz Shlita Demisha Cheshbon Hamayim Rashum Al Shemo So Rav Nisim Karelitz had also deliberated on this issue, and he said whoever's name is on the water bill is the person that has to pay for the leak, for the water that leaked out, that exorbitant bill. V'chein kasav hagri Zilberstein shlita be'aleinu l'shameach. And Harav Yitzchak Zilberstein, who's also, very, very prominent posek, we use his svarim all the time. And he said the same thing, that it's whoever's name is on the water utility bill is the one who has to pay. And he also wrote, Rav Zilberstein, that if there is no name on the utility bill, in other words, let's say the utility bill is given to the occupant of the apartment of such and such address, so then that also is the landlord's responsibility. Uv'sefer Mishpatecha liYaakov katav di'im katvu b'chozeh haschirut shal hasocher l'shalom cheshbonot hamayim tamid chayav hasocher. But there's a sefer Mishpatecha liYaakov who writes that if in the rental agreement it states that the tenant has to pay for the water bill, then it's always the tenant's responsibility. Omnam b'sefer netiv haschirus kasav da'afilu im kasvu kein b'chozeh yesh umdana shahasocher lo hitkavein l'shalem al nizilot. But on the other hand, there's another sefer that writes that even if it's in the contract that the tenant has to pay for the water bill, he could say that, well, I only signed that I only meant to pay for what I was going to be using. But if there was a leak that I got no benefit from the water that was leaking out, so then I'm not going to be liable to pay. And so there's a variety of opinions here. This is not so simple. Od Hevisham Shekasav Hagrash Zefrani Shlita Besifro Lev Netivot De La Olam Al Hasocher L'Shani. And Rav Zefrani, I don't know who that is, unfortunately. He writes that it's always the tenant's responsibility. The Ayin Sham Benetiv Haschirut Masheher Al Dvarav Behisik Tikivin De Yeshlodun Lakan O Lakan Tzarech Lahaviraik De Lachayvet Hasocher Ayin Sham. So, and the Sefer Netiv Hasichirut concludes that since there's definitely gray area here as far as who's liable for the water bill, you have to the landlord will have to bring proof that the tenant is liable, because the tenant, I guess, has the ability always to withhold rent. And so in order to extract that extra money from the tenant, where it's a case of suffix who's liable and who's not, the landlord is going to have to bring proof. Now, what does that mean? He's got to bring proof. In the absence of proof that the tenant was prepared to pay even for leaks, I guess what he's saying is that the tenant will have to pay. So, and this is in a case where even the landlord's name is on the water bill. So so the best thing to do is that whenever possible, change the name of on the utility bill for the water to the tenant. Then you as a landlord completely withdraw yourself from any controversy or any doubt. Okay. But if you can't, then it's not so clear that it's the tenant's responsibility. It could sometimes be the landlord's responsibility to pay for the leak.
Even if it's in the landlord's name, you write it in that the tenant's completely responsible for water.
Even for leaks.
Everything.
You have to specify that
It's
too.
very hard to pull apart a big impact.
Right.
How much water leaked, how much water stayed.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Very hard.
Yeah. It's going to be very hard on a practical basis.
But
Correct.
also, you learn from this that in Israel, you can obviously put it into different people's names if they're all talking about changing it from person to person.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess so. I guess maybe in Israel you can put the water bill. Wayne, can a tenant have the water bill in his name? In the tenant's
in Israel, as far as I know, when you're renting, you pay the water and the electricity and the property tax. The only thing you're renting is the shell.
But is the water bill in the name of the tenant?
Yes, it is.
There you go.
Property tax too.
And what about property tax?
Property tax is also in the name of the tenant. It's over and above on top of the rent amount.
Doesn't make any sense. Property tax is your property.
So property tax, so but so you see, that's what we would call Arnona. Is that what you call Arnona?
Yes.
Property tax, yeah. So the reason why you pay for the property tax is because the tax is to provide you with services like sanitation and street cleaning and maintenance.
Yeah.
Yes, sanitation,
Yeah.
right?
Snow removal.
Snow, yeah, when do they ever? They don't do that so much.
I'm
Yeah,
just
that was
kidding.
Very
Yeah, that was a joke.
They're
Yeah.
happy to do it. The kids will do it.
Sand removal, cat removal. No, they don't take care of that, do they? Okay. So yeah, so that's the reason why in Israel you do have to pay the property tax if you're a tenant, because you're getting direct benefit from it. And that's what we had seen Rav Sharaga say in an earlier tshuva. And we were questioning that. Like, why would a tenant have to pay for property tax? And the answer is because that's above and beyond the benefit of the apartment. You're getting additional benefits.
In Canada, you pay in strata. The owner of the apartment pay the strata, the maintenance fees.
What is strata?
Strata is, but when you are in a condominium, you pay like a condominium fee, but condo fee.
Yeah.
It's paid by the landlord, not by the renter.
Really?
Yeah, everything.
I'm not sure, I've never rented, so.
Right, but you work it into the rent.
So my daughter is
The
paying.
tenant pays the condo fee.
The tenant.
No, the tenant can just pay the rent and that's it. There is nothing.
The cost is paid by the owner.
Or maybe it's incorporated into the
Oh,
rent.
yeah, that just.
Yeah, for somehow, but that includes your water, your electricity, gas, whatever you use, it's on that.
It's not always, sometimes it is.
Really?
Yeah, it depends
Some
on the
cases it's
situation.
separate.
Some of it is
In my
metered.
case, our apartment building has 1 meter. So basically, they pay the water, they pay the electricity, we just pay a single bill. Anything extra.
But
we
it's
pay.
fixed.
Realty taxes we pay,
Uh-huh.
everything else is wrapped into the condo fee.
Yeah, but it's a fixed fee, no? You pay like 500 or 600 a month, or it's
Correct.
it keeps
It's
changing.
I wish it was just 600 and then it's over 1,000.
Just for condo fee, even when you own the condo?
Yeah, I have the condo, but I pay 1,000, I pay just over 1,000. Because that covers
All the utilities and
as
everything
well
else.
as the water, electricity, all that.
Oh, I see.
Even the cable is wrapped in.
Right.
Yeah, cable, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Internet, yeah.
And what if you don't like their cable service? you're stuck with it.
Somewhere else. That's it.
Just
That's the
vote on the
Okay.
condo board, get them.
All right. Is this in the conservatory? Where are you?
7601 Bathurst.
7601. Yeah. Okay.
So Rabbi, all these, I apologize because I didn't get the beginning of the case, but all these opinions where they say that the owner is responsible for the water bill or whatever, if the tenant was negligent, and it was leaking and he didn't report it, or he left the water running and didn't turn off the taps or whatever, I mean, still say that the owner is responsible? Or is it at some point when it flips back to the tenant because he wasn't using it properly?
Well, that's going to be part of the issue. Rav Sharaga's recommendation is whenever possible, make sure that the water bill is in the name of the tenant
Right.
so that you can avoid
I'm
any
saying in the
controversy.
absence of doing
In the absence of doing that, if the landlord discovers that he gets a water bill from a property that he's renting out, this is an exorbitant bill, he has to go to the tenant and they have to work something out because, like, in other words, what would you do in a situation like that? You would say, hey, what's been going on? I got this huge bill. And the tenant says, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't been using the water. All of a sudden, the landlord inspects the apartment and he sees a runny toilet.
Yeah.
Or there's a leak in the garden hose, right? Or whatever. And then he discovers that. So the question is that considered negligence on behalf of the tenant or not? And I guess that would be something for a Beis Din to determine whether there was an act of negligence. But even if there is an act of negligence, can the landlord say, I only agreed to pay for the water bill on the stipulation that you would do regular water use? In other words,
Right,
that would
exactly.
the burden would have to be on the landlord in order to be able to coerce the tenant to pay for the extra water usage. Because in the absence of anything in the contract, if the landlord is providing utilities, then he can't turn around to the tenant and say, well, you were negligent because you didn't notify me about this leak. The tenant could always say, well, I didn't know that I had to, or I didn't realize that it was a leak. You know, a lot of times people live with a leaky toilet and just let it run, you know.
Huh.
Okay,
Not if they have to pay for it.
not if they have to pay for it.
Especially
With them.
condominiums, you know, because you really don't care. Somebody's gonna pay the bill, but
Right, well,
it does not affect you directly.
And there's really no way, is there any way for, let's say, if there's only 1 meter on the condominium building, there's no way for the landlord to even determine whose unit has the leaky toilet.
right.
Yeah, we'll have to use it, sit on notices to people to check on things.
Right, yeah, please check your toilets and your sinks because our
We're
water
not
bill-
flush with cash.
Yeah, that's right. That's, yeah, there you go.
On that note.
Okay, okay, good Shabbos. Thank you for leaving us with a discordant note. Okay, okay. Okay, Socher, let's look at the next tshuva. Socher, sha'azav dirato. So here's another case, landlord-tenant dispute. The tenant leaves the apartment, v'shachach lechabot et hadud hachashmali. Now we got the dud hachashmali once again. He forgets to turn off the dud, the solar heater. So this thing is running, okay? Racking up the bill, the electric bill, because it's heating up the water. In the meantime, the landlord is searching for a new tenant. It takes weeks. And he discovers that this dude, the dude abides, and it is continuing to rack up this bill. Okay, you know where that line comes from. The dude abides. Okay, if anyone knows, then you know. Okay, the shayla is as follows: Sacharti dira uvetom tkufat haschirut masarti et hamaftechot lamaskir. I rented an apartment. At the end of the rental period, right, Marvin is going to leave his beautiful Airbnb in Netanya, and he's going to give the keys over to the landlord. And he's going to, let's say Marv is going to forget, because Esther told him, don't forget to turn off all of the appliances, and she leaves it up to Marv, and Marv so absentmindedly is on his shear, and then all of a sudden they have to leave, and he forgets to turn off the dud shemesh, the solar heater. The landlord does his final inspection of the apartment as I'm leaving, or right before I leave, to check for damages, to make sure that I'm entitled to my security deposit right back. And he leaves without saying a word. Hadira lo huskarat kufa. After I vacated the apartment, there was a certain period of time where the apartment remained vacant. It wasn't, they did not immediately afterwards find a new tenant. And then after a certain time, it was discovered that I had left the solar heater on, and a substantial electric bill came to the landlord. Who has to pay for that extra electricity bill for that month that the apartment was vacant, but that the dude was running and heating the water? Okay, so to me, it's an open and shut case. What do you guys say? Marv, are you on the hook? Just first of all, Marv, just don't forget to turn off the dude, okay? Make sure that the dude does not abide, okay? That's number one, okay? Number two, what would you say in this situation?
Okay, so I normally the tenant is not responsible for normal wear and tear, but abnormal, use or a misuse of the things in the apartment would give rise to liability, especially if he was negligent, he should have known better, and he failed to do what he knew or ought to have known reasonably, then the tenant would be liable.
But here, the landlord did a walkthrough.
Yeah. Yeah, so then you get into this causation. Let's say the tenant failed to meet the standard of care. He was negligent, he misused, he was improper use, and there was damage. But if there was another cause of that, i.e. the landlord himself failed to turn it off when he had the sort of the last opportunity to do that, he could be contributorily negligent, and then the Beit Din or the court here would look at the various degrees of fault and how did that impact on the damage. So let's say it could say the landlord's 100% causative, or maybe he's 50% causative or whatever, right? So you look at that.
Right. So just like in an automobile accident, there could be, both parties have contributed toward the accident, but maybe one was 80%, the other one was 20%. You could do the same thing with damage or expenses incurred for an apartment rental agreement. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But Marvin, isn't the whole purpose of the guy going through the apartment to transfer the responsibility?
Well,
when the landlord comes through the apartment, you're like handing over responsibility to the landlord.
And right, the tenant's giving him the keys, saying, "Hey, here, buddy, it's yours now, whatever."
Right. So you'd have to characterize the landlord's conduct as somehow at fault conduct too. It's not just that he had, in fact, the opportunity to turn it off. Did he have a duty to essentially recognize, that the electricity is on, the dude is on, the window was open, like whatever. But if he is post-tenancy inspecting, then one could argue that what are you inspecting for all of these different things? So, I would say it's not a slam dunk that the landlord is in fact, responsible, but you could make a good case and say, look, it's your place. Maybe, I don't know, did he warn the tenant before, make sure you turn off the switch and so on and so forth? Because I got to tell you, Rabbi, that in this place, they told us to leave that hot water switch for the dude on the entire time. Yeah, I don't have to touch it. She said, don't touch it. Just leave it on your entire time that you're there. And that's it. So whatever.
Okay, now help me understand, because whenever I go to Israel and I stay at my in-laws' apartment, I've always wondered, like, do I leave it on? Do I turn it off? Can I leave it on during the day? What's the rationale to leave the dude switch on for the entire time? What's the rationale?
I don't know. Maybe there's different, systems in place. This is a very big building. It's 22 floors high in Ir Yamim.
Are you sure that it's a dude's shemesh? Because it could be like a Yonkers. And the Yonkers, you have to.
It doesn't say dude. It doesn't say dude shemesh on the switch.
Maze Yonkers. What's a Yonker?
It's like what we would have in Canada. It's a system that works all the time, and you would have to leave the switch on. But with a dude shemesh, like when I've left on my switch in the past, it's like the switch is the electrical override when you don't have sun.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a dude shemesh. You don't need the electricity.
Right.
And if you leave the electricity on, it burns out that coil. I've had to have, on several occasions, people to come and replace this coil because we forgot to turn it off. But it might have to do with the weather too. I don't know.
It could also have to do with the age of the unit, because maybe in the more modern units, they make sure that the coil doesn't burn out.
Yeah.
Just like in modern water heaters. If you have an electric water heater, then it's designed to stay on the whole time and probably has some kind of internal thermostat or regulator that prevents it from burning out. And it could be just that you have an older unit that doesn't have that regulator, that's the reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know
I
somebody in the
suspect mine is
business,
not
I'll ask.
it's not a classic Jude
Yes.
Shemesh. Ours is probably, like Wayne was saying, an electric heater, and the instruction was leave it on. So I wouldn't be liable if I left and it burned out something. She told me to leave it on. So, you know.
Right. Okay. So you're okay, Marv. You can sleep soundly tonight and for the rest of your trip. So yeah. So to me, now I also want to just point out that in most cases, the landlord, the person who's going to do the final inspection, is not the owner of the apartment. And that, I don't know whether that creates an additional complication. A lot of people, especially let's say people in North America who own property in Israel, they will hire a management company to be in charge of finding a tenant, cleaning the apartment, doing the final inspection, giving the keys, getting the keys back, and basically covering all of that. And then all of a sudden, a bill comes for the electric bill to the owner of the apartment, and the management company says, well, you know, the tenant didn't turn off the dude before he left. So now you're going to have a third party involved in this conflict because the property manager is going to say, oh, it wasn't my fault because, you know, I told him to turn off everything. And then the owner could turn to the property manager and say, well, 1 second, didn't you do your walkthrough for the final inspection? And what isn't part of your, you know, your checklist of things that you have to do is to make sure that all of these appliances are turned off. So I think that whoever's doing the final walkthrough is going to be responsible.
Rabbi, also nowadays there are new smart meters for the electricity, so you can have the use per day, per hour. So it's going to be very easy now to tell you, okay, if you are until the end of the month, you're responsible until the last day of the month. Whatever consume after that is going to be
right. This with the smart meters, yeah, that they can tell exactly when the usage took place.
Yeah.
And I guess you need that if you're going to do like an Airbnb kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. So let's at least start the tshuva. Pashut shahasocher chayev shalem et hotzaot hachashmal. He says it's obvious that anyone who rents a property has to pay for the electric bill. Zelo nikra grama b'nezikin kevin dahabi mazik b'yadayim. And that's not called causative damage, but that's actually actual damage whenever you leave on a switch that you should have turned off. Degamim nomer sheze grama pashat shekol grama b'nezikin poter medinei adam b'chayv b'dinei shamayim. Even if you're going to say that it's causative damage, I just simply failed to turn off a switch. I didn't do anything that was a proactive act of damage to the homeowner. But the fact that I neglected, it was an act of negligence that I neglected to turn off the switch. But even there, the Gemara says that you still have a heavenly responsibility to pay, even though we can't hold you liable in a beit din. So if you're asking who's liable, we would say the person who did the causative damage. But here, when you've actually turned on the dude, and then the electric flow started as a result of your inertia. And it's no different from the case of the Gemara, where a person ignites a fire on his own property, which is a controlled fire, which he has every right to do, but he allows the fire to spread and to catch on to the grass growing or the brush growing on his neighbor's property, which eventually causes damage. In that case, the person who started the fire, even if he started it on his own property, is going to be liable for the damages that are caused by allowing the fire to spread. So allowing the unit to continue running is going to be the liability of the tenant. And then he writes, well, you know what? We're going to need some time for this because Rav Shirag is going in a direction that I wasn't anticipating, and I'm not so happy about that. So we'll see. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. I hope everyone has a great Shabbos and stay.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom. And